My sister stole my life savings and kicked me out. She didn't know I was the anonymous investor who just bought her company's debt. The soft glow of the late afternoon sun filtered through the ornate lace curtains of Alara's sitting room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stillness. A quiet elegance permeated the space, a reflection of a life meticulously curated, yet now, holding a profound, unspoken sorrow. At 78, Alara moved with a quiet grace, her silver hair impeccably styled, each strand a testament to decades of careful self-presentation. Her hands, though marked by the delicate tracery of age spots, still held an inherent elegance as she clutched the heavy porcelain teacup, its warmth a faint comfort against the chill that had begun to settle deep within her. A delicate floral scent wafted from the Earl Grey, a stark contrast to the bitter taste that lingered in her mouth, not from the tea itself, but from the digital image on the tablet resting on the mahogany table before her. It was a photograph, vibrant and annoyingly cheerful, posted just moments ago on Serafina's social media feed. Her daughter, 52, stood beaming on the polished deck of a luxurious cruise liner, a vast expanse of turquoise ocean, impossibly blue, stretching behind her. Beside her, Maximus, Alara's son-in-law, equally resplendent in a crisply tailored linen suit, clinked glasses with Serafina, the champagne shimmering like liquid gold. The caption, written in Serafina's usual effusive, almost breathless style, read, "First stop on our months-long round-the-world adventure. So grateful for this incredible journey. Cheers to new horizons and unforgettable memories. #World Cruise #Luxury Travel #blessed." Alara's gaze lingered not on the wide, seemingly sincere smiles, nor the glittering, endless sea, but on a detail almost imperceptible to others, the faint shimmer of a diamond bracelet on Serafina's wrist. It was a gift Alara had given her for her 40th birthday, a delicate piece, handcrafted with stones passed down through Edward's family. Now, it sparkled under the tropical sun, a tiny beacon of opulence in a scene of overwhelming excess. It was a small detail, Alara knew, but it symbolized everything. A gift, given with profound love and hope for genuine connection, now flaunted in an act of profound, casual cruelty. It was a slap, a dismissive flick of the wrist that conveyed a deeper message than any shouted insult could. A wave of something colder than sadness, more cutting than anger, washed over Alara. It was not a fiery rage that would consume her, not yet. It was a glacial clarity, an icy realization that settled deep in her bones, chilling her to the marrow. The months-long round-the-world adventure, as Serafina so gleefully proclaimed, was a secret Alara had stumbled upon months ago. She remembered the glossy brochure, left carelessly on her sitting room table after Serafina's last hurried visit, its pages bursting with exotic destinations and opulent amenities. When Alara had cautiously inquired about it, her voice gentle, almost tentative, Serafina had dismissed it with a careless wave of her hand, a dismissive smile playing on her lips. "Oh, just a silly idea, Mother. Far too much for you, and honestly, we're not even sure we're going." The unspoken implication had hung heavy in the elegant air, a cruel, invisible weight. "You're too frail, too old, too much of a burden. You wouldn't enjoy it, and you certainly wouldn't keep up." And yet, here they were, living a dream fully funded by Alara's generosity, a generosity they had long since stopped seeing as a gift, as an act of love, but as an entitlement, a never-ending tap of wealth that flowed solely for their benefit. The sheer audacity, the blatant disregard, the complete lack of invitation, followed by this public flaunting on social media, was a wound deeper than any she had sustained before. It wasn't just an oversight, it was a deliberate exclusion, a calculated slight, a final, definitive declaration of her expendability. It was as if they were saying, "You are only useful for your money. Your presence, your feelings, mean nothing to us." For decades, Alara had yearned for genuine affection, for the warmth of a loving family that embraced her for who she was, not for what she possessed. She longed for a respect that wasn't transactional, a simple, unburdened conversation, a spontaneous visit that wasn't followed by a veiled request for funds. She had poured her vast inheritance, the legacy of her beloved late husband, Edward, into their lives. She had believed, with a naive hope that now seemed utterly foolish, that in doing so, she was buying their happiness, and perhaps a slice of their precious time and affection. She had been wrong. Terribly, utterly wrong. The realization was a bitter pill, difficult to swallow, but undeniably true. Alara closed her eyes for a long, quiet moment, the tablet screen casting its faint, blue glow on her serene, unlined face. Her composure, always her fortress, remained intact. When she opened them again, the sadness was gone, meticulously swept away, replaced by a steely, unshakable resolve. Her grip tightened imperceptibly on the teacup, the porcelain almost groaning under the pressure. The time for sorrow was over. The time for action had arrived. The tap, she decided, with a quiet certainty that surprised even herself, was about to run dry. And they would have no idea who had turned it off, or why. Not yet. The element of surprise, she thought, would be her quiet, elegant weapon. To truly understand Alara's quiet revolution, one had to understand the empire she silently commanded and the decades of silent sacrifices that had led to this monumental moment. Her late husband, Edward, had been a titan of industry, a visionary who had built a multinational manufacturing conglomerate from the ground up through sheer grit and an uncompromising work ethic. Their marriage had been a true partnership, built on mutual respect, deep affection, and a shared vision of a comfortable, yet grounded, life. Edward had always believed in hard work and earned success. He had provided generously for his family, but always with the understanding that true value lay in character, in integrity, not just in currency. He had often said, "Money is a tool, Alara, not a measure of a man's worth. Character is the true gold." When Edward passed away suddenly 20 years ago, a heart attack claiming him swiftly and without warning, Alara was left not only with a profound grief that carved a permanent hollow in her soul but also with an immense fortune. It was a fortune Edward had meticulously structured to provide for Alara's comfort and security for the rest of her days, and to be distributed responsibly to their children upon her passing, with strict conditions to ensure it was used wisely. But Alara, in her overwhelming grief, and perhaps in a desperate, unconscious attempt to fill the gaping void Edward had left, began to interpret providing for their children with a generosity that bordered on indulgence, blurring the lines Edward had so carefully drawn. Serafina, their only daughter, had always possessed a certain charm, a captivating vivacity that Edward had doted upon, perhaps a little too much. But even then, Edward, with his discerning eye, had seen subtle signs of a budding entitlement beneath the glitter. As a teenager, Serafina demanded the latest fashions, the trendiest gadgets, and resented any imposition of chores or responsibilities, often feigning illness or exhaustion to avoid them. Edward, with his firm but loving hand, had always managed to keep her in check, instilling in her the value of earning one's way, of contributing. He would occasionally cut off her allowance for a week, or make her take on extra chores, to teach her responsibility. But after his death, that crucial restraint vanished, leaving Alara adrift in a sea of emotional vulnerability. Alara, heartbroken and seeking solace in her children's happiness, believing it would somehow alleviate her own pain, became increasingly unable to deny Serafina anything. Serafina's university years were the first clear indication of the significant shift. While her peers lived in modest dorms or shared apartments, navigating student budgets, Alara, with a heavy heart, paid for a luxurious, fully furnished apartment near campus, complete with a housekeeper who came twice a week. "It's important for her to focus on her studies, darling, away from distractions," Alara had told herself, trying to rationalize the extravagance, even as Serafina threw lavish parties instead of attending lectures, her academic pursuits clearly secondary to her social calendar. Her grades, when they came, were mediocre at best, barely enough to keep her enrolled, yet Alara continued to fund every whim, every vacation to exotic locales with friends, every designer outfit. She desperately wanted Serafina to be happy, believing her happiness was a reflection of her own success as a mother. Then came Maximus. A dashing, ambitious young man with more charm than substance, more polish than principle, he had swept Serafina off her feet with grand gestures and flattering words. Alara had initially been wary, sensing an opportunism beneath his polished veneer, a calculating glint in his eye that reminded her uncomfortably of certain unscrupulous business associates Edward had dealt with. She had tried to voice her concerns gently to Serafina, but her daughter had dismissed them as jealousy or old-fashioned thinking. Serafina was infatuated, blinded by Maximus's superficial charm, and Alara, wanting her daughter's happiness above all else, wanting to avoid conflict, acquiesced. When Maximus announced his grand plans for a tech startup, a vague concept involving disrupting the digital landscape and synergistic innovation, it was Alara's capital that provided the seed funding, then the Series A, then the Series B, despite her own seasoned financial advisor's cautious warnings and Edward's meticulously outlined investment principles. Mr. Davies, her lawyer, had gently suggested more due diligence, and Ms. Albright, her banker, had raised an eyebrow at the erratic projections. But Alara, desperate to see Serafina happy and to support her new son-in-law, had waved away their concerns. The company, always on the brink of a breakthrough, always just needing one more injection of capital, became a consistent drain on Alara's liquid assets, a black hole into which millions disappeared without yielding any discernible profit, only increasingly complex, baffling spreadsheets. Their first home, a sprawling luxury villa in the most exclusive part of the city, was purchased with a 70% down payment from Alara, a sum that could have funded several philanthropic projects. "It's an investment, Mother," Serafina had gushed, her eyes wide and innocent, "a place where the grandchildren will make wonderful memories. Think of the pool parties." Alara remembered visiting the villa, feeling like a guest in what was, essentially, her own property, her own investment. The mortgage payments, the property taxes, the exorbitant utility bills, the endless maintenance costs, all mysteriously found their way to Alara's private bank account for automatic debit. Serafina and Maximus simply assumed she would handle it, and she always did, silently, resentfully, but always. The cars were another constant expenditure. Every 2 to 3 years, a new Mercedes or Range Rover, sometimes both, would appear in their driveway, the previous one traded in at a significant loss, the new lease payments quietly absorbed by Alara's accounts. "The old one was having issues, Mother," Maximus would casually explain, his tone implying Alara should understand, "and you know how important it is for Serafina to have reliable transport for the children's activities." The children, Alara's beloved grandchildren, were the next generation of financial dependents, quickly learning from their parents. Their education trust funds, established by Edward with specific clauses for proper schooling and future security, were cleverly manipulated by Serafina and Maximus. Large sums were withdrawn not for tuition or books, but for designer clothes, international school trips that were more vacations than educational experiences, and the latest luxury gadgets, often at the expense of their actual academic performance. The grandchildren, themselves, began to exhibit the same entitled behavior, expecting lavish gifts and endless allowances from their rich grandma, greeting her with practiced hugs that felt increasingly hollow. Alara remembered countless instances, each a pinprick of pain, accumulating over the years into a dull ache. The sudden call from Serafina about a surprise medical bill for a minor cosmetic procedure that somehow ran into 5 figures. Alara paid it, no questions asked. Maximus's distressed phone call about a miscalculation in his company's quarterly projections, needing a substantial bridge loan, never a gift, always a loan that was never repaid, to avoid a collapse. Alara provided it, again, against Mr. Davies's increasingly worried frown. The necessary home renovation, tearing down perfectly good walls to install custom Italian marble and a home cinema. Alara financed it, a 7-figure sum that vanished into the property without her ever being truly invited to enjoy it. The sudden, urgent need for a private jet to attend a crucial business meeting in Monaco, which turned out to be a high-stakes gambling trip, as her private investigator discreetly confirmed. Alara paid, biting back the bitter retort that formed on her tongue. Each transaction was accompanied by effusive, if shallow, thanks, and promises of visits that rarely materialized. "We're just so busy, Mother," Serafina would coo over the phone, her voice light and insincere, "You understand, don't you? The children's schedule, Maximus's business, it's just nonstop." Alara would nod, a lump in her throat, understanding that her role had been reduced to an ATM, a provider, a convenient resource, but never truly a mother, a confidant, or an honored guest in their bustling, self-absorbed lives. Her invitations to dinner were frequently cancelled last minute, her advice dismissed with a condescending smile, her attempts to share a quiet moment met with hurried glances at their watches, as if her time was less valuable than theirs. She craved genuine connection, a simple, unprompted hug, a heartfelt conversation, a spontaneous visit that wasn't immediately followed by a veiled request for funds or a complaint about their latest hardship. But all she received was a transactional politeness, a veneer of affection that peeled away the moment their financial needs were met. The well-meaning friends, Margaret among them, who occasionally suggested she cut them off, were met with a sad shake of her head. "They're my family," she would whisper, her voice tinged with a desperate hope, "my only family left." She had believed, foolishly, perhaps, that her endless generosity would eventually melt their hearts, that they would finally see her not as a source of endless funds, but as the loving mother who simply desired their genuine affection and respect. The round-the-world cruise, flaunted so brazenly, a voyage she had funded, was the final, brutal proof that she had been living a lie. The well of her patience, and her illusions, had finally run dry. The morning after seeing Serafina's triumphant social media post, Alara rose with a quiet purpose that belied the monumental shift occurring within her. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, no lingering doubt. The pain of betrayal had solidified into an unshakable resolve, cold and hard as granite. Her mind, sharp as ever despite her age, honed by years of observing Edward's business acumen, began to systematically outline the steps required for her quiet, financial revolution. She dressed in a tailored navy suit, its crisp lines and conservative color a choice that seemed to underscore the serious nature of the day. Her first call, made precisely at 9 a.m., was to Mr. Arthur Davies, her formidable estate lawyer. Arthur had handled Edward's estate and Alara's affairs for decades, a man of impeccable discretion, unwavering loyalty, and a keen understanding of complex financial structures. His voice, usually calm and measured, held a hint of surprise when Alara's name appeared on his caller ID. She rarely called so early without an urgent family matter. "Alara, my dear," Mr. Davies said, his tone concerned, almost solicitous, "is everything all right? I hope Serafina hasn't caused any undue stress?" "Perfectly, Arthur," Alara replied, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil that had raged within her for so long. "In fact, I've never been clearer. I require your immediate assistance with a matter of considerable urgency. I would like you to come to the house this afternoon." She proceeded to lay out her instructions with a clinical precision that stunned Mr. Davies. He had known Alara to be generous, even indulgent, but never this firm, this decisive. "Effective immediately, Arthur, I wish to sever all financial ties to Serafina, Maximus, and their children. I want every single direct debit, every recurring payment, every discretionary fund, every trust fund they have access to, revoked, cancelled, or frozen. I want it done by the end of the day, if possible." Mr. Davies listened in silence, his surprise growing with each item on her list. He knew the sheer volume of transactions Alara oversaw for them. "Alara, forgive my directness," he finally said, his voice cautious, "but this is a significant undertaking. Are you certain of this course of action? It will, inevitably, have profound consequences for them." "Never more certain, Arthur. The consequences, I believe, will be entirely of their own making." Her voice remained calm, but there was an underlying current of steel. "I want the mortgage payments for their villa in Bellwater Hills ceased. I want all lease payments for their vehicles, the Mercedes and the Range Rover, terminated. The personal lines of credit I have extended to Maximus for his big business ventures are to be immediately closed, and any outstanding balances charged to him directly, with interest, as per the agreements he signed. And the trust funds established for the grandchildren's education." Alara paused, her voice hardening almost imperceptibly, the words precise, are to be frozen. They will remain frozen until I deem it appropriate to release them, and only for legitimate educational purposes, not for their extravagant lifestyles or their parents' whims. I want a complete audit of every penny spent from those accounts over the last decade. Arthur Davies, a seasoned legal professional, knew Alara well enough to recognize the steel in her voice. This was not an emotional outburst, this was a calculated, deliberate decision from a woman who had finally reached her absolute breaking point. He also knew the staggering extent of her generosity over the years, the financial abyss into which Serafina and Maximus had sunk. Consider it done, Alara. I'll begin processing these instructions this very afternoon. It will take a few days for all the institutions to comply fully, especially with international payments, but the initial notifications will go out immediately. I will personally oversee the immediate cessation of all direct debits. Her next call was to Ms. Eleanor Albright, her private banker. Ms. Albright, a shrewd woman who managed Alara's vast portfolio with quiet efficiency, was equally taken aback by the unprecedented nature of Alara's request. Alara's instructions were equally direct, focusing on the immediate cessation of discretionary transfers and the freezing of specific accounts. Any and all payments or transfers originating from my accounts for Serafina and Maximus's personal expenses, their various club memberships, their children's allowances, their household staff's salaries, are to be stopped immediately. And any credit cards directly linked to my accounts are to be cancelled. All of them. Ms. Albright, ever efficient and discerning, assured Alara it would be handled with the utmost discretion and speed. Some of these are automated, Mrs. Thorne, but we can flag them all for immediate suspension. There may be some initial confusion on their end, of course, given their current location. Let them be confused, Alara stated, her voice devoid of emotion, a faint, almost chilling smile touching her lips. Perhaps it will be instructive. A lesson, long overdue. The wheels of financial retribution, though silent and unseen, had begun to turn with the quiet precision of a well-oiled machine. Within 2 days, the first ripples of discomfort began to reach Serafina and Maximus, who were still blissfully cruising towards their next luxurious port of call, their social media feed a constant stream of sun-drenched selfies, gourmet meals, and ostentatious displays of their blessed life. They were entirely oblivious, wrapped in their bubble of self-congratulation. Maximus was the first to notice the disturbance in their perfect financial cosmos. He was attempting to purchase a rare vintage watch from an exclusive boutique in Rome, a frivolous impulse buy, when his platinum credit card was declined. Impossible, he scoffed, his voice laced with annoyance, presenting another, equally prestigious black card. That too, was declined. The shop assistant, a young woman with an air of polite skepticism that quickly turned to mild disdain, informed him, "It appears there might be an issue with your issuer, sir. Your cards are showing as frozen." Maximus, his face reddening with a mixture of embarrassment and indignation, muttered something about a bank error and stormed out, certain it was a temporary glitch, an isolated incident. He tried to call his bank, but the lines were busy, or he was put on hold indefinitely, the unreliable international signal adding to his mounting frustration. Back on the ship, Serafina, too, encountered an unexpected obstacle. She tried to book an extravagant private excursion to a secluded island, complete with a gourmet picnic and champagne. Her card, too, was declined. How ridiculous, she fumed, calling Maximus's cabin, her voice sharp with irritation. My card is being rejected. This must be Mother. She probably pressed the wrong button on her online banking again. She's so terribly old-fashioned with technology. Maximus, already irritated by his own experience, dismissed it with a wave of his hand. It's clearly some kind of system-wide error, darling. Don't worry, I'll call the bank when we're somewhere with better signal. Mother would never do anything so drastic. She needs us too much. He truly believed Alara was entirely dependent on them, a fragile old woman who would never dare to upset their delicate financial ecosystem. But the errors continued, escalating from minor annoyances to undeniable disruptions. Their usual autopay for the ship's most expensive internet package failed, cutting them off from their precious social media updates. The daily charges for their premium suite services, including their private butler and endless room service, were suddenly flagged, requiring immediate cash payment. The concierge, once so attentive and deferential, looked at them with a newfound frostiness, his politeness strained. Rumors, whispers, began to circulate among the other high-paying passengers. Then came the calls. Not to them directly, as they were at sea with limited, expensive connectivity that they could no longer afford, but to their voicemails back home, a torrent of increasingly urgent messages. The first was from their mortgage lender, a polite but firm message stating that the last payment had been rejected and that unless rectified immediately, late fees and penalties would apply. Then came the car leasing company, informing them their latest lease payment had bounced and the vehicles were flagged for repossession. Their housekeeper in the villa called, frantic, saying her direct deposit hadn't gone through, and she couldn't pay her own bills. A stream of other service providers, from their exclusive club memberships to their children's tutoring services, began to report missed payments. Maximus, a knot of icy fear tightening in his stomach, finally managed to get through to their primary bank, using a pay phone in a dusty port town. The conversation was terse, the banker's voice flat, devoid of the usual deference, and unyielding. "Mr. Thorne, Mrs. Thorne, we regret to inform you that per the explicit instructions of the primary account holder for your various linked accounts, all automated payments, discretionary funds, and access to the trust funds have been suspended. You will need to contact the account holder directly for further clarification. We can provide no further assistance." The primary account holder. There was only one. Elara. A cold dread, far more chilling than any sea breeze, began to creep into their perfectly curated, sun-drenched world, slowly suffocating their blissful ignorance. This wasn't a bank error. This wasn't a glitch. This was deliberate. And suddenly, the thought of their magnificent round-the-world cruise, paid for by Elara's generosity, felt sickeningly hollow, a symbol of their impending doom. Their carefully constructed facade of wealth and success was crumbling around them, brick by luxurious brick. The return from their truncated round-the-world cruise was anything but triumphant. What was supposed to be a majestic arrival, a grand entry back into their opulent lives, became a desperate scramble. The moment their plane touched down, amidst a flurry of rejected credit cards, the ship's final bill staring them down, and increasingly frantic calls to their ignored voicemails, the true scale of their financial devastation became chillingly clear. Their luxury vehicles, the gleaming Mercedes and the sturdy Range Rover, were nowhere to be seen in the airport's executive parking, their usual driver conspicuously absent. Instead, they had received terse emails from the leasing company stating, vehicles repossessed due to continued non-payment. They were forced to take a common taxi, an indignity that Maximus, especially, found utterly unbearable, his face a mask of furious humiliation. As they pulled up to their magnificent villa, a place that represented the pinnacle of their perceived success, their carefully cultivated image, a new horror awaited them. A brightly colored eviction notice was plastered on the ornate front door, almost mockingly vibrant against the polished mahogany. The message was unequivocal: due to multiple missed mortgage payments, foreclosure proceedings had begun. Their sanctuary, their fortress of illusion, was being stripped away. Panic, raw and unadulterated, seized them both. Serafina's manicured nails, usually so pristine, tore at her perfectly coiffed hair, her carefully constructed composure shattered. Maximus paced the marble foyer, his face contorted in a mask of disbelief and rage, occasionally kicking at an antique vase he usually cherished. The grandchildren, returning from their respective elite private schools, found their usual allowances suddenly cut off, their designer shopping sprees halted, and their trusted devices disconnected. Their complaints, once petty annoyances that their parents indulged, now echoed through the empty villa like desperate cries, adding to the cacophony of their parents' escalating despair. "Grandma always pays for this. Where's our money?" Every attempt to reach Elara had been met with silence. Her phone went straight to voicemail, her personal assistant, Mrs. Green, refusing to connect them. Her private line, typically always answered by her discreet assistant, simply rang unanswered, a cold, mocking silence. Their frantic messages, initially demanding and then increasingly pleading, had gone unacknowledged, absorbed by the void. Alara, it seemed, had vanished from their accessible world, a phantom figure who had pulled the strings of their very existence. With no other recourse, desperation driving them, Serafina and Maximus piled into an Uber, their once impeccable attire now rumpled and disheveled, their faces pale with shock and nascent fear. They stormed towards Alara's elegant, secluded home, a place they usually visited only for obligation or financial requests, never for genuine connection, never just to see her. The air in Alara's sitting room was thick with anticipation, a quiet hum of power. She sat upright on her favorite armchair, a book of classic poetry resting unread in her lap, her silver hair gleaming under the soft lamplight. Her expression was serene, almost detached, a picture of calm authority. Mr. Davies, her lawyer, was seated opposite her, a silent, reassuring presence, his face impassive. Eleanor Albright, her private banker, stood near the fireplace, her posture professional and composed, a faint, almost imperceptible nod of respect to Alara. Alara had asked them to be present, not as a shield, not for protection, but as witnesses to the final act of her liberation, the public declaration of her rediscovered strength. A furious, impatient pounding echoed from the front door, shaking the quiet house. Alara raised a perfectly manicured hand, signaling for her housekeeper, Mrs. Green, to answer. Mrs. Green, her expression grim but resolute, opened the door, revealing Serafina and Maximus, their faces a mixture of fury, confusion, and raw fear. They looked, Alara observed, quite disheveled, their usual polished veneer stripped away. "Mother!" Serafina shrieked, her voice shrill, rushing into the room with Maximus hot on her heels, his breath coming in short, angry gasps. "What have you done? What is the meaning of this? Our credit cards are frozen. Our accounts are empty. We have an eviction notice." Maximus, ever the blusterer, though his usual confidence was clearly fractured, pointed a trembling finger at Alara. "Our car's repossessed. There's an eviction notice on our door. Have you lost your mind, Alara? Are you suffering from some kind of age-related decline? Perhaps dementia?" His voice was laced with thinly veiled contempt, even in his desperation, a final, cutting insult. He still viewed her as a feeble, easily manipulated old woman. Alara's gaze was steady, unwavering, holding their panicked eyes. She looked at her daughter, then at her son-in-law, as if seeing them for the very first time, stripped bare of their pretense, their carefully constructed personas shattered. A faint, almost imperceptible smile, not of amusement but of quiet vindication, touched her lips. "Please, sit down," she said, her voice calm, clear, and utterly devoid of warmth or emotion. "We have much to discuss." Serafina, ignoring the invitation to sit, paced wildly, her voice rising in a desperate crescendo. "Discuss? There's nothing to discuss. You're ruining us. Do you have any idea what this means? Our reputation. The children. Their education. You're destroying everything we've worked for." Her tears, when they came, were instantaneous and theatrical, a familiar performance Alara had seen countless times, but Alara observed them with a detached gaze, recognizing the performance for what it was, a desperate, manipulative ploy. "Think of your grandchildren, mother." Maximus interjected, his voice rising, a pathetic attempt at emotional manipulation, tugging at the one string he thought still held. "What about their future? You're condemning them to poverty. They'll be out on the streets." Alara finally spoke, her voice cutting through their histrionics like a sharp blade, precise and unyielding. "Their future, Maximus, was never your concern, nor Serafina's, beyond how it could serve as a convenient excuse for further extravagance. The trust funds Edward established were for their education, specifically for their tuition and academic enrichment, not for designer clothes, luxury holidays, or endless allowance for frivolous spending. Mr. Davies has the full accounting. She paused, allowing her words to sink in, letting the full weight of the truth press down on them. For decades, she continued, her voice gaining a quiet power that commanded their attention, stripping them of their bluster, I have been your boundless ATM. I paid for your luxurious apartment in university, Serafina, while you accumulated debt from parties and neglected your studies. I poured millions into your startup, Maximus, a venture that never yielded a single profit and served only as a black hole for my capital. I paid for your villa, your cars, your staff, your endless emergencies, your lavish trips, your children's every whim, all while my own needs, my own wishes, were ignored. Her eyes, clear and sharp, fixed on Serafina, who now stood frozen, her theatrical sobs momentarily forgotten. Do you remember the world cruise, Serafina? The one you are currently flaunting on social media, complete with diamond bracelets and champagne toasts? The one you forgot to invite me to, citing my frailty and inability to keep up? Alara's voice remained level, almost conversational, but the sting of her words was palpable, a venomous truth. That cruise, like so much else you possess, was paid for with my money. My money, that you deemed me too frail to enjoy, yet perfectly fit to provide. You even wore the bracelet I gave you, a symbol of my love, while you excluded me. Serafina's face drained of color, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. Maximus stood frozen, his bluster completely deflated, the blood draining from his face as the full weight of Alara's knowledge hit him. The sheer audacity of her statement, and the undeniable, meticulously detailed truth behind it, struck them dumb. You never saw me as a mother, Alara continued, her voice now filled with a profound sadness that was directed at them, not at herself, a sorrow for what could have been. Only as a source. A bottomless well of funds to fuel your superficial lives. You treated me with thinly veiled contempt, as a senile old woman to be placated with hurried phone calls and empty promises, all while draining my resources for your lavish pursuits, your empty social climbing. The last vestiges of my hope for a genuine connection with you, for a return of the love and respect I so desperately craved, vanished when I saw that photograph of your cruise, a journey I paid for, but was deemed unworthy to share. It was the final betrayal. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze piercing, unwavering, holding them captive. This is not an act of a senile old woman, Serafina. This is the act of a woman who has finally opened her eyes. My decision is final. Every financial tie has been severed. You are on your own. Mr. Davies and Ms. Albright are here as witnesses to my wishes and to ensure no further appeals are made. Serafina began to sob again, but this time it was a sound of genuine, broken despair, devoid of theatricality. Mother, please. You can't. We'll lose everything. Our home, our friends, our standing. What will people say about us? Maximus, desperate, tried a different tactic, his voice cracking with a pathetic plea. Alara, think logically. We are your family. You have to support us. It's your duty. We'll be ruined. We have nothing. Alara merely smiled, a serene, almost triumphant smile, a quiet victory. My duty, Maximus, was to myself, a duty I neglected for far too long. My duty was to honor my husband's legacy responsibly, not to squander it on ungrateful indulgence. My duty was to seek genuine affection, not to buy a facade of it. My duty was to my own peace of mind. She looked at each of them in turn, her gaze unwavering, her message crystal clear. You have consistently demanded more, taken more, and given nothing but scorn and neglect in return. No more. The tap is closed. Permanently. You are no longer welcome to drain my resources. This is not a negotiation. This is the end of an era. My era of silent suffering. And the beginning of yours, on your own terms. You will now discover what it truly means to earn your way. The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with shattered expectations and the weight of their new reality. Serafina's sobs grew quieter, replaced by a defeated sniffle, her body slumped. Maximus, his shoulders slumped, his face ashen, finally understood. This was not a plea for attention, not a momentary fit of pique, not a bargaining chip. Elara was utterly, irrevocably resolute. The woman they had dismissed as a senile ATM was standing before them, a pillar of unyielding strength, dismantling their carefully constructed world with quiet dignity and a chilling clarity. They had underestimated her, profoundly so, and now, they would pay the ultimate price for their greed and ingratitude. Serafina and Maximus left Elara's home in a daze, the weight of her words and the finality of her decision pressing down on them like a physical burden. Their hurried Uber ride back to the villa was silent, broken only by Serafina's choked sobs and Maximus's furious, frustrated sighs. The elegant mansion, once a symbol of their opulent lifestyle, now loomed before them, a monument to their impending ruin, its eviction notice a stark, mocking reminder. They wandered through its grand, silent rooms, the emptiness already palpable, as if the very walls knew their fate. The reality began to set in with brutal swiftness. Within days, the repossessions escalated with relentless efficiency. Not just the cars, but the designer furniture, the expensive art, the high-end electronics, anything purchased on credit or with loans Elara had indirectly guaranteed, was subject to immediate seizure. Movers arrived, cold and efficient, to strip the villa bare, leaving behind echoes of their former grandeur. The villa itself became a revolving door of appraisers, real estate agents, and foreclosure specialists, each visit a fresh stab of humiliation. Serafina, once so meticulous about her home, dictating every detail of its lavish decor, watched in horrified silence as strangers catalogued her possessions, preparing for their inevitable auction, each item a memory of Elara's generosity now turned into a bitter testament to their fall. Their social standing, once their most treasured asset, crumbled with astonishing speed. Whispers, initially subtle and veiled, quickly turned into open gossip among their elite circle. News of their financial woes spread like wildfire, fueled by their sudden lack of luxury vehicles, their increasingly desperate attempts to borrow money from former acquaintances, and the conspicuous absence of their usual lavish spending. Lunches at exclusive clubs were no longer offered. Invitations to high society events ceased. Friends who had once vied for their company, eager to bask in their reflected glamour, now avoided their calls, or offered hollow sympathies that masked a thinly veiled schadenfreude, a quiet satisfaction at their downfall. The very people they had tried so hard to impress, the ones they had flaunted their Elara-funded lifestyle to, were now deserting them, appalled by their sudden descent into perceived poverty, as if financial misfortune were a contagious disease. The children, too, suffered the immediate consequences, their comfortable worlds collapsing around them. Their trust funds, once a limitless source of pocket money, were completely inaccessible, forcing them to confront the unfamiliar concept of needing money for basic necessities. Their elite private school informed them that tuition was overdue, forcing them to transfer to a less prestigious, public institution, an absolute humiliation in their social circles, a blow to their carefully cultivated image. Their expensive hobbies, horse riding lessons, private art classes, exclusive sports club memberships, were all abruptly halted. Their entitlement, nurtured by decades of unchecked indulgence, turned into bitter resentment directed squarely at their parents, whom they now saw as incompetent failures. The once charming villa, now stripped bare of its luxuries, became a cold, silent tomb, echoing with recriminations and despair, a grim reminder of their lost paradise. Serafina and Maximus, who had never truly worked a day in their adult lives, were forced to confront the harsh reality of self-sufficiency. Maximus attempted to revive his vague business, only to find that without Elara's endless, unquestioning capital, his nebulous ideas held no appeal to legitimate investors, who quickly saw through his bluster. He grudgingly took a low-level management job in a company far beneath his perceived status, struggling with the mundane realities of a fixed salary and actual responsibilities. Serafina, stripped of her social standing and her endless shopping sprees, found herself adrift, without purpose or means. She attempted a few part-time retail jobs, but her lack of experience, entitled attitude, and inability to take instruction quickly led to her dismissal. Their lives were a constant struggle of budgeting, penny pinching, and the crushing weight of their newfound mediocrity, a concept utterly foreign to them. While their world collapsed in a flurry of foreclosures and social ostracism, Alara's world began to quietly, beautifully expand. The immediate aftermath of the confrontation was a profound calm, a deep sense of peace she hadn't felt in decades. The air in her home, once heavy with unspoken resentments and the weight of her sacrifices, now felt lighter, cleaner, infused with a fresh, invigorating energy. The silence was no longer a symbol of loneliness, but of profound peace and self-possession. On the afternoon following the climactic confrontation, Alara allowed herself a simple, yet deeply symbolic, indulgence. She walked into her sprawling rose garden, something she had always loved but rarely found the mental space to fully appreciate, her mind too consumed by the demands of her family. The exquisite scent of blooming roses filled the air, a fragrant balm to her soul. She spent an hour simply tending to the bushes, pruning dead blooms, her hands, still elegant, gently touching the vibrant petals. It was a meditative act, a quiet reclamation of her own time, her own space, and her own joy. Later that evening, she did something she hadn't done in years, something that filled her with a nervous anticipation she hadn't experienced in ages. She called Margaret, an old university friend, a woman of sharp wit, genuine warmth, and unwavering loyalty, whom Alara had slowly drifted away from as Serafina and Maximus's demands consumed her life. Margaret answered on the second ring, her voice filled with delighted surprise. They talked for nearly 2 hours, laughing, reminiscing about shared adventures, and sharing stories Alara had kept locked away for too long. It was a conversation rich with connection, devoid of ulterior motives or veiled requests for money. It was liberating, a rediscovery of authentic human interaction. The next morning, Alara contacted a luxury travel agent, not to book an extravagant round-the-world cruise for show, but a quiet, intimate trip she had always dreamed of, a 2-week journey through the Scottish Highlands, staying in small, charming inns, exploring ancient castles, and hiking through breathtaking landscapes. A trip designed purely for her own pleasure, for the quiet joy of discovery, far removed from the glitz and demands of her former life. It was a small step, but it was profoundly significant. For the first time in decades, Alara was choosing herself. She was spending her money not out of obligation or a desperate yearning for approval, but out of pure, unadulterated self-love and newfound freedom. The shackles were off. Months turned into a year, then 2. The stark contrast between Alara's flourishing new life and the struggling existence of Serafina and Maximus became a testament to the undeniable truth: genuine wealth lies not in what one possesses, but in the peace one cultivates within, in the richness of one's spirit. Alara's home, once a silent bastion of her quiet endurance, now hummed with a gentle vibrancy, filled with light and laughter. She had fully embraced the newfound freedom her decision had afforded her. Her mornings began with invigorating walks in her blossoming garden, followed by painting sessions in a sunlit studio she had converted from a forgotten guest room, a space now dedicated solely to her creative expression. Her canvases, once blank, now burst with vibrant landscapes and abstract expressions of her inner joy, each stroke a testament to her renewed spirit. She enrolled in a university extension course on art history, finding immense satisfaction in intellectual pursuits that were purely for her own enrichment, not for social standing. Her social life, once dictated by the whims and demands of her immediate family, was now rich and fulfilling, built on genuine connection. Margaret, her old friend, became a frequent visitor, their shared laughter echoing through Alara's elegant rooms as they discussed books, art, and life. Alara also joined a local charity, dedicating her time and resources to causes she genuinely cared about, finding true purpose in helping others who were truly in need, not those who merely feigned it. She hosted small, intimate dinner parties for her genuine friends, sharing anecdotes and laughter, the atmosphere light and free from pretense or expectation. The trip to the Scottish Highlands had been everything she dreamed of and more, a true adventure for the soul. It was the first of many such journeys, quiet retreats to ancient European cities, serene cruises down picturesque rivers, not in lavish suites for public display, but in comfortable cabins for personal enjoyment, soaking in the culture and history. Alara discovered a profound joy in solitude and an authentic connection with the world, a joy far deeper than any she had ever experienced trying to buy the affection of her family. She looked younger, her eyes sparkling with a renewed zest for life, her posture more confident. The quiet dignity she had always possessed now radiated as a powerful inner glow, a palpable aura of self-contentment. She was finally, truly, living for herself, using her wealth to enrich her own spirit and the lives of those who genuinely valued her for who she was, not for what she had. Meanwhile, Serafina and Maximus's world, once glittering with borrowed splendor, had become a stark, barren landscape. The villa had been foreclosed and sold, its grand rooms now belonging to strangers. They were forced to downsize drastically, moving into a modest apartment in a less desirable neighborhood, a grim reminder of their new reality. Maximus, after several failed attempts to secure funding for his nebulous business ideas that consistently lacked substance, had grudgingly taken a low-level management job in a company far beneath his perceived status, struggling with the daily grind and the loss of his former influence. Serafina, stripped of her social standing and her endless shopping sprees, found herself struggling to adapt. She attempted a few part-time retail jobs, but her lack of experience, entitled attitude, and inability to take instruction quickly led to her dismissal. Their lives were a constant struggle of budgeting, penny pinching, and the crushing weight of their newfound mediocrity, a continuous cycle of frustration and resentment. The grandchildren, having been pulled out of their elite private schools, were forced to confront the realities of a normal existence, a world without unlimited allowances and private drivers. While they initially resented their circumstances, lashing out at their parents, the harsh lessons of self-reliance slowly began to sink in. They had to work part-time jobs, rely on public transport, and learn the value of a dollar earned rather than simply given. The experience, though painful, slowly forged a resilience and a maturity they had never known, teaching them independence. Their relationships with their parents, however, remained strained, resentment festering over their parents' inability to maintain the lavish lifestyle they had grown accustomed to. Serafina and Maximus, stripped of their material comforts, found themselves constantly bickering, the fault lines in their superficial marriage widening under the relentless strain of financial hardship and mutual blame. They were forced to rely on each other, a concept they had always avoided, preferring to lean on Alara's endless generosity. Alara occasionally heard snippets of their struggles through mutual acquaintances, of their attempts to rebuild, of their growing friction. But she felt no malice, no triumph, only a quiet acceptance, a gentle understanding. They were learning, finally, the harsh but necessary lessons she had tried for decades to impart through love and indulgence, lessons they could only learn through hardship. The greatest lesson Alara had learned, however, was her own. She had spent a lifetime trying to purchase affection and respect with money, trying to fill the void left by Edward, only to discover that these invaluable commodities are not for sale. They are earned through genuine connection, kindness, and reciprocal love. Her true legacy was not the vast fortune Edward had left her, but the dignity she had reclaimed, the boundaries she had set, and the profound self-respect she had finally embraced. She had learned that loyalty, above all else, must first be owed to oneself. And in that ultimate act of self-preservation, Alara found a freedom and a joy that no amount of money could ever buy, a richness of spirit that truly transcended all material wealth. If you enjoyed this powerful story of justice, resilience, and the invaluable lesson that self-worth cannot be bought, then you're in the right place. Our channel is dedicated to sharing inspiring narratives of personal transformation and life's profound lessons. Don't miss out on more stories like Alara's. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you're always the first to know when we release a new video. Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever faced such profound ingratitude from someone you've helped? Or perhaps, like Alara, have you reached a breaking point and decided to reclaim your own life? What would you have done in Alara's shoes? Share your thoughts, experiences, and advice in the comments below. Your insights help build a community of strength and shared wisdom. We love reading your comments.